I pre-ordered the Jeti DS-14 back in April of 2014, and I'm going on about 8 years of really high quality usage with this radio. I love it. I have it set exactly the way I want. But as is customary and traditional, when new things come out, you start pondering, should I get one of the new radios? The G2 DS-14 looks really tempting. However, when I stepped back and I really looked at what I really wanted more in my 14, is that I really wanted 2 more switches. And so I know there's a lot of videos of how to replace a switch, how to move the switches if you want them in a different location. And I remember hearing rumblings that it's just as easy to add 2 switches to the 14, but you just don't really hear a lot of people talking about it. So I went and figured out that it really is just that simple. So I went to my good friends at aeropanda.com and ordered 2 new switches. They're like $16 a piece. Had to get the pack of replacement nuts. And I figured, hey, I'm going to add these 2 switches. I haven't seen a video for adding these on switches SD and SE. So I figured I'd just film it really quick and show you guys how easy it is to simply add 2 additional switches to the empty ports on the front of the DS-14. Here's what we need to get started. First, we have the 2 switches. Now you have to make sure these are the DS switches that have the ribbon cable, because the ribbon plugs in to the PC board. The DC switches plug directly in. Next, we have the front special nuts that go on top, and we have the special tool to tighten and loosen those nuts. And then just for fun, I got some of these nice red rubber switch covers from Aeropanda. First things first, we're going to somehow work on this from behind. So I'm going to have this piece of foam that came with the radio to set it upside down like this. And then we will simply unscrew the Torx screws to get the back plate off. We'll go ahead and speed through this. The back plate just lifts off. You have to be kind of careful. It doesn't come off all the time, so just take your time to get this off. And the very first thing we should do after we open up and take off the cover is to unplug the battery. You can clearly see at the bottom where it's plugged in, and there's a Molex switch, I believe, that just comes out of the port. Now we're good to go. So let's zoom in. I'm pointing to the extra port on the 14 and then the little switch cover that we're going to have to remove. So that switch cover, you really need to get in with some pliers and squeeze it from behind and push down a little bit just to kind of get it loose. And it's a little awkward, and I did my best to show this, but just squeeze it, get it a bit loose, turn the radio over, and then you'll be able to be really careful and pull this out. Now we need to put the ribbon on the switch, and I've seen all the other switches in the radio. The blue portion is facing away from the switch, so it just slides in there, and take your time to make sure it's fully seated. Now we see that hole, so we'll just go ahead and run that cable generally where we think it's going to. We don't have to plug it in right now. I think it's easier to get the switch in there, secure it, and then insert the cable. So we'll insert the switch through the hole, and then we'll flip over the radio and use one of the new nuts to secure it. I'm kind of holding the switch with my finger from behind. Put on one of these new nuts. We'll tighten it with the tool, and the switch is installed. Now, this is probably the hardest part of this installation, is getting these ribbon cables into their connectors. It's not impossible. I urge you to take your time because you don't have a ton of room, but I wanted to clearly show what a fully seated cable looks like. And it's not, and I just was able to fully seat it right there. So get a good picture of what it looks like fully seated. So let's move over to the other side. Same thing. We'll take out the cover, mount the switch, and mount the cable. Again, the blue side of the ribbon cable faces away from the switch. And here I have it's hard to see with some of those ribbon cables there. I have a flashlight to show you where that hole is. It's in the same spot as the other side, obviously, but just wanted to show you that hole in there. And this is just fully demonstrating how limited space you have here. So again, we're just going to run the cable where we want it and push the switch through the hole and secure it with the nut. What's really interesting, the good thing is I was worried I was going to have to take a bunch of these switches off. These two inside switches, you don't need to remove an existing switch to get to. But for example, if you wanted to replace SF there, you were probably going to have to remove SG, etc., etc. So at least these two inside switches, you don't have to really fiddle with anything else. And this side was a little bit harder because the open port was the second port from the top, so I had to really fiddle with the existing ribbons. But again, take your time, get it inserted, and you'll be fine. All right, everything's inserted. Let's go ahead and reconnect the battery and reinstall that back plate. And we'll be ready to turn the radio on and see if this worked. I am filming this. I have moved switches before, but I've never added a switch before. So I have a pretty good idea that it should say new switches added, new configuration, hopefully. I'm pretty sure everything's good. I know I've heard reports of people putting in those ribbons maybe backwards on one side and having to go in and reset them. But here we go. We turn on the radio, and sure enough, warning controls layouts has changed, and we see the blinking switches. It sees SD and SE, and we are good to go. And the last thing, I'm going to put on some of these rubber switch covers. Now that I have a few more switches, I just wanted to really delineate, because obviously you're hardly ever looking down at your radio when you're flying, but these cool rubber caps are from AeroPanda and they slide right on, and I don't have them for looks. I'm having them to have a little bit of a different tactile feel for these new switches, since I've been flying for so many years with this radio without SD and SE. But just wanted to show you there's long ones and short ones to help out. So everyone, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed watching this. I realized I needed to add these two switches instead of buying a new radio, and I said, hey, let's record it. I've seen things about changing switches, but I've never seen a video or tutorial on adding the SD and SE switch to the 14. It's clearly possible, very easy, and your radio recognizes it as soon as it turns on. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.